Thank you, Chairman. You can start the meeting now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Richard Dallin, Chairman of the Planning Committee for South Northamptonshire Council. Welcome to our July meeting. As you'll gather, once again, we are online, virtually, around the world. So wherever you are, you'll enjoy our proceedings over the next hour or two. Now, we start off, as is customary, with apologies for absence. So Leslie Farrell, who is our Democratic Services Officer, will tell us who isn't here and who is coming instead.
Yes, we just have apologies from Councillor Carol Clark, and Councillor Roger Clark is substituting.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, Councillor Hollowell, perhaps.
Thank you, Chairman. My normal declaration concerning all matters concerning archaeology.
I'm obliged, and I take it no one else looking around, no declarations of interest. Thank you. If we go on to item 3 on our agenda this afternoon, which is the minutes, this refers to our meeting that we held on the 11th of June virtually. I hope you all had the chance to have a look at the minutes. Is it your wish that I sign them when COVID permits, physically, but actually mentally, as it were, this afternoon virtually? Is it your wish? If you could put your...
Agreed.
Yep. Grateful. Thank you very much indeed. When that moment will come for the actual signing ceremony, I'll have a few meetings to sign. We don't know yet. However, we move on to item 4, which is my announcements as chairman. Firstly, to announce that one of our applications, which is on the agenda this afternoon, which is listed as item 8, this is Thorpe Mandeville Manor, Banbury Lane, Thorpe Mandeville. This refers to S 2019-1801 MAF. That application has been withdrawn. It was withdrawn by the applicant on the 2nd of July. So obviously we'll not be discussing that this afternoon. Now, since we are virtual, I will just remind people to make sure that your mobile phones are switched off or on mute. And as is customary on this committee, we speak and behave appropriately, because the world is watching us and wouldn't wish to be looking at us ill-favourably. Right, if we go on, item 5, well, this is a quick one. I regret to say that we don't have any proposed pre-committee site visits. The reason being we're not allowed to go on any site visits at the moment. While our officers can, we cannot as a committee. When that is allowable, then as appropriate, we will then go on one of these visits. Right, so to the first of our applications this afternoon, and this is item 6 on the agenda, land to the west of Bedford Road, Little Houghton, and this is on pages 25 at starts of your committee agenda, and I will call upon the planning officer, case officer Saffron Lowsbury, to talk us through this application, please. Saffron Lowsbury.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just wanted to make sure everybody can see my screen. This application is for the development of 22 houses in the village of Little Houghton, which is approximately sort of 5 miles east of Northampton Centre. And if I share my screen with you, let me see if I can everybody see that?
No, not yet.
I think it's just coming now.
Yes, we
can now.
Okay, wonderful. Yep, everybody see that? Okay. Okay, so the application is for all matters reserved except for access for the development of up to 22 houses. And this is the OS map up here in the top left-hand corner, and the site application area outlined in black here. The village confines are detailed in the black dashed lines on the left and to the north, to the west and the north, sorry. And the conservation area is marked in sort of a pink colour. I don't know how clear that is on here, with the listed buildings marked in grey. So this is an aerial of the site location, and you will see that it's, like I said, outside of the confines and to the south of Homemaker, which is this access here. Can you all see my cursor okay?
Yes, we can.
Yep, lovely, okay.
Yes.
Which is the access here, which is Homemaker, and this is Little Houghton School in here. Members may recall that there was an application under 2018-1706, a major application that was submitted previously for 32 dwellings on this site. That was presented to committee previously. It was subsequently withdrawn, and this application is a resubmission for 22 units in the same location. The application proposes also not just the access onto the site, but also as part and parcel of the proposal, access and a new access for the school. And I will show you that here. There we go. Layout plan. Bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to make that more visible for you. Does everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the access is not only for the 22 units, but also for a new access instead of the current arrangement, which is along Lodge Road at the moment, as you can see, which is this stretch of road along here. Access is frequented by people visiting the school bus, and the arrangements in here, I believe, have been ongoing for some time and have caused some concern locally for a considerable amount of time, far longer than my involvement in the application. And the purpose of that application and this application is to overcome that with a new access into the school. So there we go. And as you can see from the indicative layout plan, that's what's being proposed in this area here with staff parking. The application also proposes, alongside Section 106 requirements in accordance with our local plan, it also proposes seven affordable units, which equates to 32%. This has come about as an ongoing review of the viability assessment between South Northants Council and the applicant, the viability assessment as a result of providing the road and the affordable units. So I'm just going to quickly run through some photos with you that were taken by my predecessor, who actually dealt with the application beforehand, Wayne Campbell. And I'll go through these with you just so that you get a reminder of the site, as we're not doing site visits. This is accessing from Bedford Road from the south. As you can see here, you've got the backdrop of Homemaker in here. And as we progress along that road, you can see the school in the background here. And as we approach the road further, you can see how the road sits quite low in comparison to the land height, quite an undulating entrance into the village. And as you can see, you've got Homemaker here, church in the background, and the school. It's quite well screened. And again, just as we move further into the site, if you want me to stop on any of these, please say so. And this is looking across the site. The school is over in this direction here, just looking at the tree belt that surrounds it on the way into the village. In this area here is where you will see the listed buildings, the predominant cluster of listed buildings which are along here. And the sort of surrounding area. This is Homemaker here, which is the road that runs to the north of the site. And again, the northern boundary, properties facing into the site. This is the boundary with the school. And looking from the boundary of the school back out to the village to the main road. Okay, I will stop it there, and if there are any questions, then please feel free to ask.
Well, thank you very much. Indeed, are there any questions from members of the case officer at this point?
No, thanks.
Yes, Councillor Elaine Wiltshire, I think I see your hand waving.
Yes, just one quick question. Is the tree belt by the school going to remain?
Obviously, landscaping is subject to the reserve matters. So essentially, if we wanted an element of that tree belt to remain, then we could put a landscaping condition in there to make sure that there is a good, strong tree belt along that side of the site.
Yes, I think that would be a nice idea, to be honest with you. I think it'd keep it fairly private as far as the school went and the buildings as well.
That can be in due course. We're dealing with what we are at the moment. Thank you, though. Any other questions at this point of the officer? I can only.
Yeah, it's Councillor Pritchard here.
Yes, Councillor Pritchard. Yes, thank you. Go ahead. Sorry, I couldn't see you.
What is the criteria for the development outside of the village confines?
Well, if I go back to my report, I did cover that in the relevant paragraphs. Bear with me 1 second. The development under in terms of the criteria, we're looking at policy R1, which, if I just recall, because I don't have the documents in front of me, so do bear with me whilst I read through my report. I don't have them off the top of my head. Part 2 of the local plans, which obviously carries a weight considering its processes. In all cases, development in the rural areas will be required to provide an appropriate mix, including housing, not to affect open land of particular significance to the form and character of the village, to preserve areas of historic and environmental importance, to protect residents' amenities, to be of an appropriate scale, to promote sustainable development, and to be within existing confines unless there are particular or exceptional circumstances, which is we have considered given the community requirement for the and the changes to the access to the school and those facilities. That R1 goes on to say that once requirement for the rural areas has been met, development will only be permitted where specific criteria applies. In this instance, the proposal is considered to have regard to enabling local communities to identify and meet their own local needs. As the exception, the application has been informed by an effective community involvement exercise prior to the submission of this planning application. This revolves around the improvements to the school access, parking and school bus facilities.
Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right, that's good. Thank you. Anybody else want to? Yes, Councillor Johns.
Yes, really regarding the issue of viability, has this now been completely bottomed out? Because I know in the past we've had applications agreed and then later on discovered that some of the commitments signed up to by the developer hasn't been met because they've come back with alternative claims about viability. So in terms of the affordable housing and the road, is this now, if this were to be agreed today, is that fixed?
We believe so, yes. We've gone backwards and forwards extensively with the applicant in terms of viability, and my colleague and I, Paul Greenidge, have really gone through everything with them. And Paul is actually around today if you wanted to speak to him directly about viability. In particular, this case, I did want him to be on board just in case there were any questions around that, because it is quite complicated.
Well, thank you. I think it might be appropriate. I think I get Councillor John's information. We perhaps should hear from Mr. Brunning since he's with us. Paul, do you want to say something?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, so just to pick up on Councillor John's question there about the extent of work that's been done. So a viability appraisal was submitted towards the back end of last year using the Three Dragons model that the council is familiar with. Now, at the outset, it was just a series of figures. There was no supporting information to back up some of those figures. And I did initially have concerns about some of those figures because they were outside the normal benchmark and parameters that we would be expecting to see. So as Saffron has already suggested, there's been significant going backwards and forwards with the applicant, so that they, subsequent to submitting the viability, they then followed that up with a report which itemised all of the different elements of the viability in terms of the revenues and costs. We've then gone back to them to verify.
Can you move your mic up, Paul?
Yes, can we just hear you a bit more, Paul?
Sorry.
Yeah, you moved your microphone slightly away from your mouth, as far as I can see on the.
Oh, I
screen.
see. Sorry.
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah. Go on.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So, yeah, just to recap then. So, in terms of all of the costs, because part of this, because it's enabling development, there are certain costs which the applicant is incurring in terms of the enabling part of the development, in providing the coach drop-off point, for instance, and security gates for that. What we did was we asked the applicant to provide third-party quotations to verify all of those costs. Now, initially, when they submitted their appraisal, they were proposing 5 units of affordable housing, which equates to 23% of the development. By going through a very detailed process and verifying all of those costs, and then doing some sensitivity testing at the end of the process, what we've been able to get to is an affordable housing mix of now 7 units. In doing that, all of the parties involved have had to compromise slightly. So from the developer's point of view, what they've accepted is a reduced profit margin to be able to get to a point where we get to a land value, which means that the landowner would be prepared to release the land for development. And obviously the compromise for the council is that we've had to reduce the affordable housing quota effectively down from 11 units to 7 units to make that happen. But in answer to the question, yes, this over a period of several months, this has been gone into in significant detail to arrive at the position we're in now.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Councillor Johns, do you want to make any other observations in that regard?
Well, not really. I mean, that clarifies matters, but it's just my concern that, particularly given the economic situation we're in, are there any guarantees that further down the line towards this development, they'll come back and say the viability has changed again, or is this as good as we can get?
Well, let's leave that as an open question. Roger Clark, Councillor Clark, you want to say something?
Chairman, yes, I think this is an opportunity missed. This has been ongoing for a long time. I am aware of that from my previous involvement. The issue boils down to the price of the land in the first place. That's why the viability has come into question, and indeed the number of affordable homes not meeting our requirement of 40%. I accept making allowances for on-cost, additional costs in the word of enabling costs for coach towing and so on. But it does boil down, and we've experienced this on many other applications, and that is the cost of the land in the first place. Everybody seems to work backwards. We'll pay so much for the land, then we work backwards from there. It should be the other way around. What is required first, i.e. 40% affordable, turning circle, then you go out and purchase the land.
Just to stick to our procedure, have you got a question for the officer, Councillor Clark, at this point?
Other than that, which I'm sorry, but other than we missed an opportunity to stick to 40% affordable homes.
All right, well, indeed, let's pause that. Unless there are any more specific questions, we can.
Chair, could I?
You may, Councillor Holloway, let's say something.
Yeah, but just a question actually of the officer, because I've only just noticed it. In the consultations, county asks for some money in a 106 towards public transport, but that's not found its way through into a summary on page 51. Is there any particular reason for that?
It may well be because it's included in the update. If there is anything missing in the content in terms of the section 106 and it's not in that paragraph, it will be in the update or vice versa. There was a couple of elements that were missed off it, and I did try and update that properly in the update, so we will not miss anything. They are fully aware of all of the costs that are involved. some of the information was missed out in it, and it was picked up by somebody else, and I tried to update that. So if it's not in the update, then I will make sure that it's included, but essentially we will not miss anything, don't worry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you. Saffron, perhaps you could just now stop sharing your screen with us so we can
Absolutely.
all see each other in glorious larger size. Indeed, there we go. So all of us are here. Right, now we move on to our speakers. Now, just to remind those of you who are joining us for the first time, and the committee as well, we are unable to have speakers addressing us in the normal way, since we are not meeting in the forum as we would normally do so. And the protocol is that we invite those people who wish to address us to record an audio recording, and then we will play it one by one. And so our first speaker this afternoon for this particular application is Selina Jacobs, who is clerk to Littlehampton Parish Council. And if Leslie, you could play that recording for us, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, I will. I'll just say that she's speaking on behalf of the Parish Council.
Indeed.
This is Selina Jacobs on behalf of Littlehampton Parish Council. Just calling to give my statement for the committee meeting this Thursday. Littlehampton Parish Council has consulted extensively with residents regarding the merits of the application since it was submitted in 2019. Our response to you dated the 16th of August 2019 makes it very clear that the Parish Council and Village support for the application is dependent upon there being adequate provision for parents to drop off and collect children from the school. Otherwise, we know that the long-standing traffic congestion problems experienced in Lodge Road and Lodge Close will merely be transferred to the new development. On the 13th of February 2020, a revised site plan was uploaded to the planning website showing 7 parking spaces on the new development, which would facilitate parents dropping off and picking up children. We believe that this amendment was the developer's response to the Parish Council's consultation comments referenced above. It is very disappointing to see that on the 24th of June 2020, a further revised site plan has been uploaded showing an increase to the amount of affordable housing, but with the 7 parking spaces removed. With parental choice in education, it is inevitable that pupils from surrounding villages and Northampton Town will be driven to school by parents, with the school bus only serving Great Houghton and the village hopper service not being designed to coordinate with school timetables. Whilst pupils from Little Houghton can walk or cycle to school, it is not feasible to expect those from further afield to do so. The Parish Council would like to strongly emphasise that support for this development was not about affordable housing, but about providing a safe and sustainable access to the school and, crucially, adequate parental drop-off and pick-up parking. Littlehampton Parish Council urged the Planning Committee to insist that approval of the application is conditional on the reinstatement of the 7 parking spaces for parental drop-off and pick-up, as shown on the plan dated the 13th of February 2020. Many thanks.
Thank you. That was Selina Jacobs speaking there for Littlehampton Parish Council. Well, we're now going to hear from Greg Smart, who is agent to local residents as an objector.
Residents of Homeacre wish to outline their strong objections to these proposals. We're surprised and disappointed by the U-turn officers have made, having previously recommended for refusal a scheme for 32 homes here in late 2018. The officer's report fails to justify why the development is now deemed to be acceptable in principle. Littlehampton does not offer a high level of sustainability and is identified in Policy SS1 of Local Plan Part 2 Settlement Hierarchy as a Category B secondary village. The site lies outside the settlement confines and is open countryside. Policy LH1 confirms that development in the open countryside is unacceptable in principle, except in very specific circumstances, none of which your officers accept apply in this case. The Council confirms that a 5-year housing land supply can be demonstrated, and in these circumstances, there is no need to apply the tilted balance as set out in the NPPF. Quite simply, the NPPF makes it clear that where applications conflict with an up-to-date development plan, they should be refused. JCS Policy R1 states that once the housing requirement for the rural areas has been met, further housing will only be permitted where certain criteria are satisfied. The key criterion here is where development is required to support the retention of or improvement to essential local services that may be under threat. Little Houghton Primary School is thriving and not under threat. Indeed, your officer's report notes that the school is operating at capacity and forecasts high levels of demand. The application was considered at a parish meeting on 13th August 2019. Of 61 attendees, 35 voted in favour and 26 against. Thus, only 8.5% of the village population is in favour. We share the parish council's grave concerns in their letter of 16th August 2019 that no off-road parking is being proposed for parents to use for drop-off and pick-up, so they will still be forced to park on street. This is confirmed by Northants Highways in their response to the application. No detailed surveys of Lodge Close at peak times are provided to justify why the existing arrangements are a threat to the school. The data that is included reveals no recorded accidents, so there is no safety concern. To conclude, this application conflicts with a number of up-to-date policies of the development plan, and your officers have acknowledged this. We believe there is no exceptional justification in this case to allow a significant development of 22 houses in the open countryside. We would therefore urge members to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was Greg Smart, the agent for the local residents. We now have as our final outside speaker, Paul Johnson, who is the agent for this application.
My name is Paul Johnson and I speak today on behalf of the joint applicants. This is a hugely important application for Little Houghton, one that delivers the solution to a problem that's existed for nearly 50 years. The application proposes a new dedicated pick-up, drop-off and turning area for large vehicles attending the school. These must currently navigate the highly constrained Lodge Road and Lodge Close, where substandard carriageway width, significant levels of on-street resident parking, historic building patterns and tight geometry lead to congestion, vehicles mounting and damaging curbs and other vehicles, and adversely impacting on pedestrian and highway safety. Parish records list a catalogue of complaints and attempts to find solutions over the years, but car ownership continues to grow and pressures on on-street parking down Lodge Road remain. The various parish organised consultation events and meetings have demonstrated the village-wide concerns over these matters. This application therefore represents the first genuine opportunity to find a modern 21st century solution to the perennial issue of the access to the school. No more sticking plasters or orange cones, but a proper, sustainable long-term solution. The main user of the new dedicated area will be the daily school bus, alongside buses and coaches used for school trips. The new access and pick-up drop-off area will completely remove buses and coaches of all sizes from Lodge Road and Lodge Close, thus negating these issues, and will provide a modern, suitably sized highway that's been planned and tracked to accommodate the worst case, largest vehicles from the outset. Additionally, all large vehicles attending the school, delivery vans, stationary supply lorries, food deliveries, fire tenders and any other emergency vehicles will not have to navigate the narrow streets and parked cars of Lodge Road. The area will also provide much needed on-site staff parking during the day. These are significant and demonstrable benefits. The area will be constructed by Francis Jackson Homes with the necessary gates and fencing to ensure safeguarding and security. The current access to the school will remain open to allow parents the choice to continue to walk, cycle or visit the school by car by either the current route or the new one, significantly further reducing the pressure down Lodge Road. The proposed layout is indicative only, and I can confirm we're happy at reserve matters stage to provide some appropriate parental drop-off provision in suitable locations. This can be secured via condition. These community benefits are facilitated by the erection of 22 vernacular style dwellings. After extensive viability testing with the council, 32% will be affordable housing alongside a full Section 106 and SIL package. Given the character of the village, proximity to the conservation area and nearby listed buildings, these houses will be of the highest quality, with 9 properties constructed in ironstone under natural slate roofs. All will have large driveways to prevent the need for any residents to park on street, in stark contrast to the current situation down Lodge Road. This application has been in development for over 4 years. It represents a once-in-a-generation chance to resolve these issues once and for all and ease the significant long-standing pressures on Lodge Road and Lodge Close. We respectfully ask members, therefore, to support the application accordingly. Thank you.
You're muted, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed for telling me you couldn't hear me, which I merely was saying thank you very much to everybody who've just spoken, but you wouldn't have heard that, but you have now. Now we turn to our debate. Normally we go to, first of all, to a ward member, and as it happens, one of the ward members is a member of our committee. So I think, unless anybody objects, I will call Councillor Stephen Holwell to kick us off in our discussions, if we may.
I don't want to speak twice, so shall I reserve my comments for the main debate, Chairman? But
you may, unless you wish to kick us off in the debate. It's entirely.
Well, I would like to do that, yes. If
in that case, let's start the main debate, if we may, and I'll call upon Councillor Holwell once again.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Clark has said before, this has been a long time in gestation. The project started, I think, probably 5 years ago when Andy Darcy issued a call for sites, and a number of landowners at Little Houghton did submit some suggestions. As a result of that, the parish council held an exhibition in the village hall. They put all of the suggestions up and carried out a kind of a vote of which site was the preferred option. Now, this was just at this stage, this was very much in general terms, and this site was the site that gained the most votes. It rapidly became really a project not about housing primarily, but a project to provide this newer access to the school. I agree with the objectors that I don't think the present arrangements are not a matter of safety, because traffic barely can move fast enough to cause an accident, but it is certainly a matter of convenience and the quality of life for the people who live in Lodge Road and Lodge Close, because 3 or 4 times a day there is chaos as buses and parents come and go. This is because within this ward there are four schools, 4 primary schools, and all of them, in order to keep their numbers up, take children from outside their own parish. There was a 5th school at Brayfield, and that didn't, and that failed about 20 years ago and had to be closed. So although from a transport point of view, it looks kind of unsustainable to have all these parents and buses bringing children in, if it wasn't for that, the school would be closed, and we would then be paying for all of these buses to bus the Houghton children elsewhere. So the whole transport thing is quite complex, and there are different ways of looking at it. The parish council, and I agree with them, have always looked upon this from quite early on more as an enabling project. What they see is the need for the new road, the new access. It can't be paid for any other way than through a development. And so in its purest form, I would have expected a development with enough, no more, enough market housing to pay for the new road and to give the developer 20% profit. As it is, along the way, we've gained some affordable housing. And I think certainly whether 7 is too many for a village that doesn't really have a great need for affordable housing, that may be too many. But I think the parish are willing to accept some. But what the parish council, as you heard earlier, what they're concerned about, and I think what some of the objectors are concerned about, is will the new access road, will it do the job that it's intended to do? Or are we just going to move a traffic problem from Lodge Road and Lodge Close to a new estate? That's what they're concerned about. And I think that's the point that I want to address, because although today we're only going to vote on the outline and the access, what comes next is essential. Because if the Reserve Matters doesn't come up with the goods, people will feel cheated, and rightly so, that they've agreed to something in outline, and then when they see the detail, they're going to be very upset. What I want to do at this point is I'm going to ask Saffron if she could put a map up for me. Can't hear you, Saffron.
Sorry, apologies. Can everybody see this one?
Not yet, no.
It's coming. It's coming.
Okay. Can I just talk, because in the normal way we would have made a site visit and things would have been perhaps a lot easier. But let me just, this is the applicant's map. One of a whole series of layout plans which have been developing over a period of time, subject to consultations with highways and other people. This is about 2 plans back. And at this point, the parish were thinking, well, this is probably okay. So the idea is that you've got the old Bedford Road to the left, coloured yellow. That was at one time a trunk road, so it's quite a wide road, although it's not now. You've got the entrance to the proposal, and then the blue areas are the parking areas, essentially. So buses can come in. There's a big turning area. There's also a dedicated place for a bus, I think, to park to one side. It really works on the premise, a little bit like the taxi rank at Euston or St Pancras, where there's a constant row of taxis pulling in, picking up a child, going round and out again, and the next one follows. Really, primary schools don't work quite like that at the end of the day. It's far more chaotic. And so on this version of the plan, we've got the other blue area down here with seven off-street car parking places. Now the parish council are upset because later versions, those 7 places went, and more importantly, they went and they were not replaced with anything. So that's why they're upset about it, and a lot of other people as well. Something which has got is kind of allied to this, and something which upsets me, and this is to do with the design of the estate. What we've got here is that you see the road network proposed in grey, and with the footways in a sort of an off yellow. We established with highways many years ago, we had battles after battles with highways to say that in these small developments in villages, there is no need for a footway on both sides of the road. We've always said that. Here we're back again fighting the same battle, and I want you to look at the footway on the entrance on the south side, on the lower side, if you like, near to the bottom of your page. That footpath doesn't even go anywhere. It's not needed. And what I'm suggesting is that if that footway went, which it ought to go anyway, then that would allow some on-street car parking just for the peak hours. There are no houses need front onto that footway. So it's not as though somebody would be looking out their front window at cars. That need not happen. It's an ideal place there, and there's good turning area in the middle and so on. So what I'm suggesting is that while I agree with the case officer's recommendation regarding the outline and access, and I agree with her, her conclusions on the principle of the development. Yes, but I think more attention has got to be taken for the reserve matters stage. And what I would like, and I've spoken very briefly to Paul Seckington about this, what I would like to see is some golden thread created from this stage to the next, so that whichever authority has to determine the reserve matters, they know exactly what people have signed up for, what they've signed up to. As it stands, we just don't have enough off-street car parking, and we're going to have chaos in there. So I think, Chairman, that's all I need to say. Saffron, unless there are any questions on the map from anybody.
Well, thank you. I'm just wondering whether it'd be helpful if Paul Seckington, whom you mentioned just now, might make an observation looking forward as you were attempting to do in what you were saying, Paul. And if you could just lose the picture here at this point, Saffron, as well.
Sure, absolutely. Bear with me.
Well, thank you, Chairman. In response to the question from Councillor Hollowell and the suggestion put forward, if members felt that in order to support the application they would require off-street parking for parents of the school, then that is something that we could attach a condition on the outline requiring the provision of a parking area, and the details of that will be captured in a discharge condition of that, and also through the reserve matters layout. At the moment, this is an indicative layout that you saw, so it can be subject to change on the final design. You saw on that other layout there was space to provide it. It doesn't have to go there, it could go somewhere else. You could move the houses slightly around. So we could in my view, attach a condition if members wanted to ensure the provision of that moving forward.
Councillor Hollowell, did you want to come back on that?
No, I find that quite acceptable. I like Paul. I'm sure that it's possible. But there always is this problem with the two-stage process that you can lose the thread, and we must not let that happen on this occasion. If committee are minded to give consent for the outline, I think it's essential that we tie the reserve matter stage into what we know the parish want. And when I say the parish, I don't mean just the parish council. The people that have taken part in parish meetings and exhibitions and questionnaires over the years. That's what they really need. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Perhaps we could broaden the debate. Others would like to have their say. Who do I see? Yes, I see Councillor Townsend. Would you mute your microphone, Councillor Townsend? Unmute your microphone.
Yeah, I think this is an absolutely fascinating application, and it shows that, as far as I was concerned, I was waiting to hear what Councillor Hollowell was saying, and he summed it up so well, what our difficulties are. And I think it is, as he points out, really important that as we go, I mean, it's quite likely that the next stage will be under the new council. So whatever we agree today must reflect truly what has been said. I mean, what is being suggested is not outrageous. I mean, what the parish want for the people and everyone wants is, is eminently sensible, and I'm willing to support that. But it must be, we must get what we actually sign up to today. I think that's really important. I mean, otherwise we don't want the diminution of affordable houses. We want the parking, and I think that's absolutely essential. And that must go through to the next stage.
Thank you very much indeed. Who would like to go next? Councillor Pritchard.
Let's make sure. Thank you, Chair. Just when you look at the proposals itself, if obviously the access to the school actually is of paramount importance, one of the things, I don't know whether it could be put into reserve matters, but things like, will parking be restricted along Lodge Road? Otherwise, there can be a situation where you can get this new access road in and, people will still be parking along Lodge Road. And secondly, with regards to the maintenance, that this road obviously is going to have heavy vehicles along it, coaches, lorries and so on. Has it been determined yet who will actually maintain this particular road? Will the local authority take over responsibility, or will it be down to the parish?
Well, let's get back to the case officer on these 2 points. Saffron, do you want to come in first on the concern about the Lodge Road parking?
There aren't any restrictions along Lodge Road that would stop anyone from parking along there. It doesn't necessarily mean that we can stop the parking down there. Anyone can park down there. I think the key was to remove the bus and the larger vehicles that were using that access and that road to access the school. And so therefore that is being removed as a result of the new access road. If people choose to park down there, I don't think there's anything that stops them at the moment, and I can't see why NCC would highways would put further restrictions down there. I don't know whether, Paul, that's something that is considered or not. I don't think it's something that we can control.
It's obviously a public highway at the moment, and people can park there, and obviously the people who live down there can park on there. I don't think we'd want to add restrictions. How would you restrict? Oh, parents couldn't park there, but the residents could. It'd be difficult to do that. And I think if you give people the option of an alternative access and the bus provision coming in that way, then that solves, from officers' point of view, that situation. And moving on to the second point, Saffron can correct me if I'm not quite right, but I understand that the new road will be to adoptable standards and for the county to adopt as part of the highway, rather than it being falling to the parish or anyone else to maintain. It'll be a local highway.
That's correct, but also there is some funding from the Section 106, which is included as part and parcel of the maintenance for the gates for the school and that area as well. So It's as far as I can see, and obviously we don't have Francis Jackson to be able to come back to answer any further questions on that, but essentially that is all accounted for.
It was just I wanted to ensure that the road will be adopted by the
Okay.
county authority. Okay, thank you very much.
You had those points answered. Anyone else who would like to join our discussions on this? Yeah, Councillor Budden, are you indicating?
Yes, I'm for the situation. We're going to improve the situation as far as the school's concerned, and that's priority.
Short and sweet. Thank you very much indeed. I look around the screen and I can't see anybody else particularly raising their hand or gesticulating in a certain manner. So we do have we have the recommendation before us. I sense that maybe Councillor Hollowell, you might like to sort of propose something based, including those points that you raised earlier.
Well, quite simply then, I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation to approve the application, but with the addition of a condition suggested and phraseology provided by Mr. Seckington regarding the reserved matters application.
I'm seeing sort of nods and down by Mr. Seckington's box there, so I think he can do that. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Elaine Wiltshire, I saw your hand first, just before your husband, so you'll be the seconder on that. All right, well, shall we move to a vote? In which case I'll call on Leslie Farrell to call out our names and to say yes, no, or again, or abstaining. Leslie?
Thank you, Chairman. We'll start off with Councillor Bignell. Are you, this is a proposal to accept the recommendation. So are you for the recommendation?
For.
Councillor Breeze?
For.
Councillor Budden?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
Councillor Cooper?
For.
Councillor Dallin?
For.
Councillor Hollowell?
For.
Councillor Johns?
For.
Councillor Samiotis?
For.
Councillor Pritchard?
For.
I don't think Councillor Surgerson Brooke is with us, is she? No. Councillor Townsend?
For.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire?
For.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire?
For.
That's unanimous then. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed for that. So that has been
Chair.
approved. Now,
oh, excuse me, Councillor Bignell's got his hand up, Chairman.
yes, he has. Sorry, Councillor Bignell.
Sorry, Chair, I've just spoken to Mary Ann Surgeon Brooke on the phone and she's unable to join this meeting and sends her apologies at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So duly noted apologies for non-attendance. All right, so we will now move on, if we may, to the next application, which is Thorpe Mandeville Manor, and this is being brought back to us from our committee meeting that we staged in May. I'll call to the case officer, Susan Garber, to take us through it.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me properly?
Yes.
Excellent. Right. Thank you. Good afternoon. This application was deferred from the May Planning Committee to allow it to be considered with the other proposal for the same site. That other proposal has now been withdrawn. So this is the only application that we're considering for the Thorpe Mandeville site. I'm just going to share my screen and I'll be able to give you my presentation.
Yeah.
Right, can you
Yes,
see the plan?
Yep.
Excellent. Right then. So this is the site plan. The site comprises Thorpe Mandeville Manor and its immediate grounds. The manor is a substantial Grade 2 star listed building dating from the early 18th century. The front of the manor faces west to Banbury Lane and the rear faces east towards the grounds. To the west of the manor are associated stone walls, gate piers and gateways, which are all Grade 2 listed. To the north of the manor is the large detached stable block, which is also Grade 2 listed. The site lies immediately northeast of the junction between Banbury Lane, which is the main road through the village, and Bulls Lane, which is a narrow single track road. To the rear of the manor are landscaped grounds, which are terraced and slope down to the east. The grounds also include a menage to the northeast of the stables. The manor has benefited from significant restoration and refurbishment in recent years. The manor and the stables are within the defined village confines, which is shown as the dotted line on that plan, and the other buildings and the grounds are outside the confines. The site has two vehicular access points from Banbury Lane. One is in front of the manor and one is in front of the stables. And between them, they create a large gravel parking area to the front of the manor and the stables. The site has neighbouring dwellings on three sides, to the south, west and the north, as you can see in that plan. The majority of the site is within the Thorpe Mandeville Conservation Area, which is shown in pink on that plan. The site is also within the defined special landscape area. And slide 2 is the aerial of the site taken some time ago before the major refurbishment works, and you can just show the proximity of the neighbouring properties and the extent of the grounds. And slide 3 just shows you the conservation area in pink, the listed buildings highlighted in red, and the village confines as the dotted line. Members may remember the site visit that took place at the end of last year, but I have taken some photographs more recently to show the interior and exterior of the building. So this photograph is taken within the dining area with the windows facing the garden. And you can show the small area of patio to the rear of the property. And that wall there separates the manor house itself from the other buildings on the site, including the stables. That's within the dining room. And again, within the dining room. This is taken from the hallway, with the dining room to the left. And the rear door goes into the flower room, which leads into the garden. So there's no direct access from the dining room outside to the garden. This photograph is taken from within the terraced gardened area, and the property here is one of the nearest residential properties, and that's Stable Cottage. And this is the boundary wall between the manor house, Bulls Lane and Stable Cottage. This is the southern patio to the side of the property, which shows the proximity of the manor to the stone wall, Bulls Lane, and the neighbouring property, the court. And this is a view taken from the front of the manor house, looking to the dwellings opposite. And so this is the red line plan for the proposal, and the application seeks permission for a change of use from a residential dwelling to a mixed-use dwelling, C3 use, and private function venue, which is a D2 use. The change of use is for the house only, for private booked events of up to 100 guests, so events will vary from between 10 to 100 guests. The proposal would include the use of the site's gardens. There are no alterations proposed to the manor itself or to the site. The proposal includes the use of the existing parking area for parking during events. The key issues set out in the officer report are the principle of development, heritage impact, impact on residential amenity, highways impact, and the other matters raised. The above issues have all been considered in the officer's report. The proposed mixed use is supported and considered to be acceptable in principle by the Conservation Officer and the Council's Economic Growth Team. The proposal would support the upkeep of the building, which is Grade 2 star listed. The key issue considered in the report is the impact on residential amenity, being quite close to the neighbours. The impact of noise is the main issue. There are neighbouring dwellings on three sides. The nearest neighbours are to the south, and these are Stable Cottage, which you saw in the photograph, and the court in the corner here. Both are over 30 metres away from the nearest point of the house. The submitted noise assessment identified the baseline and ambient noise level on a Saturday evening last June, which is covered in paragraph 9.35 of the report. And the submitted noise management plan identifies the potential sources of noise from the proposed use. The main noise source will be from the music proposed to be played within the dining room of the manor, which is roughly central within the rear elevation of the house. You can see there, that's the dining room with the photographs that I've just shown you. So there's no direct access out that way. You'd have to come through the hallway, through the flower room and out there. And now the Manor has a premises licence for music to be played from 4 p.m. to midnight, Monday to Sunday. A condition of the licence is that windows remain closed. The noise management plan states a noise limit of 85 decibels will be employed, and that's the internal level within the dining room with the windows closed. The noise management plan predicts noise levels from the dining room with the windows closed, and that's covered on the following plan there. So this is a noise contour plan and shows the predicted noise level at the nearest neighbours. So the nearest neighbours here, Stable Cottage and the Manor, and the predicted noise level will be between 30 to 33 decibels. The noise management plan includes measures to mitigate against the noise impact, as listed in paragraph 9.39 of the report. The Environmental Protection Team have no adverse comments to make on the proposal based on the submitted noise assessment and the noise management plan. That team are aware that some events have taken place at the site and noise complaints have been received. At this point, there is insufficient evidence to substantiate if the use for private functions involving licensable activities constitutes either a public or a statutory nuisance. The premises licence includes several conditions, and these are listed at paragraph 9.41 of the report. The licensing subcommittee are satisfied that a public nuisance will be avoided if the licence conditions are adhered to. Environmental Protection advised that a temporary permission would allow an assessment of the effect of the proposal and the adequacy of the controls through the licensing regime. The noise levels in the noise management plan are predicted, and therefore monitoring of the use and events taking place is required to ensure that the predicted levels are accurate and to assess the adequacy of the controls and the mitigation. A temporary permission is therefore recommended. This will be a temporary permission for 2 years, and this period has been chosen taking into account of the fact that coronavirus may preclude some D2 events for a short while. Proposed conditions also secure adherence to the noise management plan, agreement of a noise monitoring strategy, no sound amplifying equipment in the garden, and the hours of use of the garden, which would be up to 11 o'clock PM for events of up to 30 people and 9 PM for events of up to 100 people. At the previous committee, I spoke that there was a short update, and that update still applies. So that just provided an update of the noise assessment table in figure 1, and which gave us background noise levels, further background noise levels from 11 till midnight, and that we don't need condition 1, so that's deleted as some D2 events have already taken place. Now there is also an update for this committee as well, so I'll just go through that too. So in terms of the local plan, the new Part 2 local plan, we've now received the inspector's report, which was received on the 23rd of June, and that has concluded that the plan is sound, subject to modifications. So that plan will be going forward for adoption to the council meeting of the 22nd of July. So what I recommend in the update is that the changes to that plan don't alter the conclusion of the report or the recommendation. But I have set out that there's a slight change to the policy wording of policy SS2, which relates to amenity and noise impact. So I've set that out in full in the update. And I've also recommended that the reasons for the conditions are updated to refer to those emerging policies, just to ensure that that's up to date. There has also been further clarification from our licensing department. So licensing have clarified that the whole building is licensed and music can be played from any room. The license doesn't limit capacity either in the building or the garden and doesn't have a 9 PM cutoff point for numbers in the garden. So the key point there is that the proposed conditions for the planning permission, I have proposed that these place restrictions on the events that aren't covered by licensing. So the licensing controls are a little bit more lenient, and what I've proposed in my recommended conditions are more stringent and go further than licensing, which is allowed. So that's condition 7, condition 12 and condition 6. We've also received an email from an objector since the previous committee, sent to one of the councillors, and that email has been made available on the website and can be viewed in full. This relates to concerns already raised previously and covered in the previous report. There was a query in that email about noise monitoring from mobile phones and the fact that it was given limited weight in my original report. I've gone back to Environmental Protection Team, and they had advised me that the sound level meters on mobile phones cannot be calibrated, and so any results need to be treated with caution and would need to be validated by measurements from an appropriate measurement device that meets the specifications required and which has a traceable calibration history. So my recommendation is the same, that the limited weight can be given to those noise measurements from mobile phones. So in summary, my recommendation is as per the officer's report, but with the deletion of condition 1 and the updates to the reasons for conditions as set out in my update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you could now sort of extinguish your extra screen, and then we'll see all of ourselves in fuller form. And as we do so, would any members of the committee like to ask any questions of the officer at this point? Yes, Councillor Breeze.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask the officer just to clarify the point she made about which has the legal ascendancy over the licensing and the planning? I got a bit confused when she said that there could be music in all the rooms under the license, and yet with the planning it's only in the dining room, and she's put stringent conditions. I'd like clarification of which trumps the other, if there was an issue over music coming from an upstairs bedroom window or another window during an event.
Susan Garland.
Thank you. Yes, it's slightly complicated, this one. So I've been talking in detail with licensing and environmental protection. Basically, the license covers music from the whole house in the same way that they can have music in the whole house if it's a dwelling. They can still have music in the whole house if it's being used for an event. So televisions, radios, all of that kind of thing can go on. But in the noise management plan, they've specified that the large equipment is likely to be based, will be based in the dining room. And the noise management plan is specific that the measures for mitigation are for the whole house. So the noise levels coming from the house don't exceed that level. Whatever room that noise is coming from, they cannot exceed that level.
Councillor Breeze, you want to come back?
Yes, so in effect, our conditions are ineffective because it's for the whole house, although the noise level does cover the whole house. And if it's for an event, so what's an event? Is just an ordinary weekend rental where you've got, I don't know, 10 couples come in and have taken the house for the week? Is that an event? Or is an event a wedding or something where you bought tickets?
An event would be any D2 use, so it would vary from 10 people using it for an evening, you know, for a meal or whatever, a small gathering, small celebration, or up to 100 people using it for a wedding celebration, for example.
Okay, any other questions of the officer at this point? Councillor Townsend. If you could demute yourself, yes.
Yeah, just sort of following on from that. Is the licensing thing, our permission is going to be temporary? Is the licensing the agreement temporary as well, or is that a permanent thing now?
Susan?
I'm not a licensing officer, but my understanding is that that license has been granted. I don't know whether it's time limited. I can double check that for you. I do have a copy, but I do know that that license can be called in for review if there is an issue. So, for example, if there were complaints within the next 2 years, if this permission were granted, that license could be called in for review, and that license could be taken off the applicant if there were issues.
Councillor Townsend, do you want to come back on that? With that microphone again, please.
That's fine at the moment. Thank you.
All right. Yep. Excellent. Good. Anyone else like to ask a question? Councillor Pritchard.
A couple of points, actually. First one actually is, what is the situation with regards to patios? I gather there's 2 patios around the house itself. And secondly, it's going to be very difficult indeed to ensure that windows are always closed, particularly when you think of a warm summer's night. And thirdly, could you confirm that when you look at the size of the dining room, it actually is much smaller than some of the other very large areas there? Would the music be allowed in those other large areas, particularly when you consider up to 100 people? Because obviously they won't be able to fit into the dining room.
Go ahead, Susan.
Sorry, just unmuting. Right, in terms of the patios, there is a patio to the rear of the property. So as I said, I'll just bring my, oh no, I can't show you that. To the rear of the property, where those windows where the dining room windows overlook the garden, there's a small patio there, and there's also a small patio to the south, to the side of the property, as well. And at the moment, as worded, the conditions would allow use of both of those areas, but restricted for guests over 30 guests. The use of those areas would be restricted after 9 o'clock.
Would they be allowed to take drinks out into the garden?
At the moment, the licence precludes that, but that condition of the licence has been challenged, and we are awaiting the results of that.
And the other point with regards to when you look at the dining room that's where presumably the only music can actually be played during an event. When you look at the size of up to 100 people, that obviously is going to be small. Presumably that the participants wouldn't be allowed to take music into the much larger areas.
As worded, the conditions don't restrict music in other areas of the property, but as worded, the conditions do control the noise that comes out of the property. So the noise management plan is covering the house as a whole, and Environmental Protection are happy that the noise modelling that's been done and the mitigation measures proposed will ensure that that noise is not unacceptable at the neighbouring properties. I'd just like to add, in terms of the windows, the licence does secure that there's a condition on the licence to secure that windows and doors are closed during events, except for obviously people coming in and out of the property through the doors.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much, Officer.
Councillor Hollowell, I think you were putting your hand up as well.
I don't mind if Councillor Breeze wants to go first.
Well, no, she can wait a minute. It'll come to you first. She says.
Okay. It's still on the noise. It's condition 5. I've read the noise management plan, and it's very detailed, but the actual implementation of it is very fussy. I've got a village hall in my ward where there was a similar problem. There was a problem with noise and complaints to environmental health and so on. And that was cured just by a small gadget in the room. And as soon as the sound, doesn't matter where the sound came from, once it got above, I think it was 85 decibels, it just cut the main off. That was it. End of story. And then they had to start again and make jolly sure. So it didn't just control, it didn't just limit it to 85. If you went to 86, it cut it off and you didn't do it again. And it was a very simple and easy device to use. Could we not, if the committee were minded to approve the application, could we not consider that as a condition rather than worrying about all the detail in the management plan?
Well, it sounds a very novel idea. Probably get it on Amazon or something, this device you described. However, thank you. Susan, do you want to respond to that suggestion? I think it is.
Yep, noise limiting devices are a potential mitigation measure. The way the conditions are worded, we have conditioned the noise management plan that has been submitted or an alternative that can be agreed. And in addition to that, condition 6, prior to first use, we are requiring the noise monitoring strategy, and that does include details of any amendments to mitigation measures. So the finer detail of the mitigation and the final detail of how the noise is going to be controlled will be dealt with before any events take place. That is a requirement. So it's prior to first use of any events. So noise limiting is a potential option that could be employed.
Good.
All right, thank you very much, Chair.
Now, Councillor Breeze, you want to come in again?
Thank you. The next application has been withdrawn, but there's still a 10 notice for the 3rd of October, which is referred to on page 87, paragraph 7.3. Under that, there's a temporary event notice for sale of alcohol and live music between 4 and midnight in a marquee behind the Menage for up to 150 people. 10 has no control over people using the garden, and it does not have conditions that limit noise.
This is a temporary event notice in case anybody doesn't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. So there's obviously going to be some function there on the 3rd. 10 notices can be used up to 28 days in any calendar year. And the statement, the 10 has no control over people using the garden. So we could have 150 people wandering into the garden and no noise control.
How about that one, Susan?
Okay, so again, it's this crossover between licensing and planning. So although a temporary event notice has been granted, the applicant does not have planning permission for events and does not have planning permission for the erection of a marquee. Under the permitted development rules, if a marquee is within the curtilage of a building, then you don't have permitted development rights for the erection of a temporary structure. So they don't have the 28 days under those permitted development rights because it's in the curtilage, because it's within the garden. There has been a new class, BA, introduced into permitted development rights. But again, that doesn't apply either. Because it is again within the curtilage of a listed building. So basically, even though they've got the temporary event notice, they do not have planning permission. So if they were to go ahead with an event, that would be unauthorised.
Yes, Councillor Briggs, do you want to say something more? Are you sort of just to
so it goes from being an authorised event to now, because they've withdrawn the application, it's now an unauthorised event. So the 10 can't apply.
They still have a temporary event notice because it's a separate regime. But if they haven't got planning permission, even if they have an application pending, they still don't have planning permission. So they can't erect that marquee without planning permission. So it would be unlawful for them to do that.
Okay, that does clarify that. Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. On part of the clarification on the noise management arrangements, on number 7, it states there, no sound amplifying equipment shall be installed or operated within the garden. What about the situation where you had a band or an orchestra that didn't need sound amplification equipment? Presumably, they would be allowed to do it.
Yes, that would be permitted under the wording of the conditions as they're worded.
Yeah, but you can imagine if you had a 20-piece orchestra or, in fact, a brass band in the garden.
It could happen then, could it, Susan?
Yeah.
Under the wording of the condition as it stands, that's right.
I think that should be looked at very closely.
I'm sure that's been noted. All right, any other questions before we start discussing this in more broad detail? No? All right, well, We don't have the ward member, unfortunately, here this afternoon. Just to make one point, people wondering why we can't hear from objectors and any public speakers. We did at the last time, this meeting in May, we discussed this application. This has merely been deferred because we wished to have it linked with the other application, which has now been subsequently withdrawn. So that is why we're not hearing from public speakers. But we can, of course, hear from all our councillors who wish to speak. So who would like to start us off in our general discussion? Anybody volunteering that role? Yes, all right, Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
Thank you, Chairman. I must admit I'm extremely uneasy about this application. There appears to be a complete overlap between what licensing are allowing and what planning are saying could be allowed. And I see so many gaps in the overlap and so many loose wordings in the conditions, and I think the whole thing is going to turn into a total disaster. I mean, the comment there about conditions of windows and doors remain closed except during the ingress and egress of people is it's an open-ended recipe for fully open doors. You need people wandering back and forth. Doors are going to be open all the time. The whole thing is so loosely worded, and I would say so difficult to enforce, that I really think it has to be, or I'm minded to oppose it, because I think it is, whatever we do is going to be unenforceable.
Thank you very much. Another view perhaps from around the committee. Councillor Townsend, you go next.
Well, it's a really tricky one, this, isn't it? It's a great pity we haven't got Councillor Sargent-Brooke here, because she's the local member, would give us that local view. But I think we were quite right to ask for this application to be heard with the one for the garden, because it is quite clear that they are separate applications, but they are, I think the word is contiguous with each other. I mean, in other words, they are related one to the other. And my concern, or one of my many concerns, is what use can be made of the garden when using the house. I mean, you know, the house at the moment, as you say, is completely, say, all the windows are closed. Nevertheless, people are still going to go out onto the terrace and such like. We've got no control over that. And you know, whether music is played or whatever, I just don't know. But I rather agree with Councillor Wiltshire that this is, it's so loose, and I feel incredibly uneasy about it. I'm mindful that these people obviously have their tactics of withdrawing the application, I think is regrettable, but that's been done. I'm certain to make us concentrate on the house, and the house we can't consider out the garden. The garden, it looks to me from reading that paper, I mean, we're not talking about the garden. Nevertheless, I mean, it did throw up all sorts of issues, which I think will come through from this other application. And once we allow it, we know one thing leads to another, and so on. So I remain incredibly concerned, and I just wonder how on earth it is actually going to be monitored. And that worries me as well. We haven't got the officers to do all that, and how is it actually going to work? So at the moment, I feel very very tricky. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bignell next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify,
we can't hear you very loudly at the moment. If you could just raise your levels slightly. Like you've now.
Is that better?
Lower your microphone.
Try that.
Yeah, that's better. Go on.
Sorry. Yeah, just to clarify what Councillor Townsend said, Mary Ann Sargent-Brooke would have not taken part in the debate because she would declared an interest she knows one of the owners or the applicants, so she would have not taken the debate, so she couldn't have contributed to anything that was being debated.
Thank you. I'm grateful for that information. Others of you would, yes, Councillor Elaine Wiltshire, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm concerned about the audio equipment that they've got for measuring the decibels of the sound, because we've got this facility in the town hall in Brackley and it doesn't work. And it was put in by, as you know, the Heritage Lottery people for purely limiting the sound, but it does appear that these sort of equipments can be altered by a lot of the people that are running discos and music events. So I do wonder about the sound system, and I do have concerns about the noise levels of this property.
Thank you. Well, perhaps Councillor Hollowell better tell you about what goes on near his village hall, where everything seems to be muted when it gets too loud. All right. Anyone else like to join this discussion? Or...
Can I? Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Hollowell, you can.
Yeah, if I could. I think I have come across it. I get this problem regularly with licensing versus planning consent with a site in the ward, and it is a nightmare. I think at this stage, it's better to ignore the license altogether and just treat it as a normal planning application. Think of what could go wrong, and that's what you would try to allow for in the conditions. I think that's easier to deal with. If the sound could be controlled in the way that I suggested earlier, I could be persuaded to vote for the officer recommendation. But before anybody else jumped in on the same tack, I would make this warning. This is a 2-year temporary period. And I think if members, even if members were willing to give it a go, if members felt in their heart of hearts that there is a more than 50-50 chance in 2 years of it being turned down, then really they shouldn't support it now, because that's not fair to the applicant to engage in a business, get set up, and then effectively lose his consent. So I think before you vote for this, you've got to think very carefully.
I just say, though, that we are considering the application today. We're not thinking about what may or may not happen in 2022. But thank you for your comment. Anyone else like to say anything? Yes, Councillor Johns, your turn.
Yes, I think the music can be controlled in the house, but my concern is people spilling off into the garden late, or from my point of view, late into the night anyway. And that's the big issue for me, and the ability of us or officers to control that. I think we could tighten up some of the conditions to include live music and so forth, but there is still that concern that the whole business case seems to be based on people being able to access the garden. I'm not so concerned about what goes on inside the house, because I think the noise could be controlled to a reasonable level, but it's avoiding the spillage of people, particularly in summer months, out into the garden up to midnight, and that's the issue, really.
Have you got a suggestion how to get round that?
My suggestion, I think, myself on balance, I would go against the officer's recommendation. I think it is very finely balanced, because I think I can understand the applicants, the case he's putting forward to maintain the house and property, to create some local employment and so forth. It seems all perfectly reasonable for small term events. But there's plainly also I know we can only look at this application, but we can't ignore the fact that we know the applicant really wants events in marquees outside in the garden. And yeah, so I mean, I think on balance, but I think it's very finely balanced. And I do have sympathies with the applicant, but I would tend to err on the side of caution and refuse.
All right, anyone else want to comment? Yes, Councillor Breeze, your hand I see first.
Thank you. So if we give permission, if we grant permission, then we are actually enabling events to go ahead in the garden under TENS, under the temporary event notice, which seems an odd quandary for us to be put it with, because I agree with Councillor Johns that it's that aspect that really concerns me. The applicant has gone ahead and made the investment in the property without the benefit of getting planning permission first. So that's the risk that he's taken. I am still balanced. I do think there might be merit in considering it for 2 years and watching it really closely, if we can be sure that our officers and others are able to instigate the necessary controls. So I am tending in that direction, but I look forward to hearing what other people have to say.
Well, it might be helpful perhaps if one of the officers, maybe it's a second to you, comment on the observation. Can the officers deal with the showing that the temporary license, if we agree it is the permission is allowed, is not in any way gone wrong?
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the debate, and I recognise people's concerns with the application, given the proximity of obviously the neighbouring residents and the concerns that have been expressed, and the difficulties between the licensing and the planning. In terms of Councillor Breeze's last comment about if we approve this, does this mean the tenders can go ahead? Well, no, because we're just talking about the house being used for these events. They can't put up the marquee even if we grant this permission. That would be in breach of that, breach of planning for that. So there's no risk there in terms of what you're granting today in terms of the use of the garden. It's clear there is a concern over the use of the garden. Initially, we'd put down the suggestion of no amplified music in the garden, because that's what Environmental Health was saying, that it's just amplified music that could cause harm. But if members felt it appropriate to condition it a bit tighter so that there's no outdoor music at all, then that's something that we may consider putting that condition on. But also to say that condition, which one was it, the 6th, that asked for the noise mitigation strategy. Yeah, noise monitoring strategy, that is the condition, that's the tool we're using, so that before they can do any more events, they have to submit how they're going to monitor and mitigate the noise further. And a suggestion, as Councillor Hollowell put out, was that if it reaches the limit of 85, then it cuts out. That's one option. Other options are available. And if we are going to put those conditions on, go back a stage in terms of the outside use, I think if you're going to rent out a house like this and use it for events, part of the charm of the property is the use of the garden. I think that'll be a selling point to people, and you wouldn't be cooped up in the property all the time. You would want to spill out into the garden areas. It's how we control that use of the garden. And if we do put that more restrictive condition about music outside, but we can still use the grounds as they could. At the moment, it's a house that people live in, a number of people, and they will spill out into the garden anyway and use their garden and generate some level of noise. So it's not that there will be noise, because noise will be expected. It's the level of that noise. So I think the way we're controlling it is right. Again, temporary permission is right, because that gives us the chance to review it in 2 years' time. And also, we can monitor those conditions. They are enforceable, otherwise we wouldn't have suggested in the first place. From our perspective, we can monitor and manage those conditions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think Councillor Pritchard wanted to say something.
Yes, right. Yes, I visited the particular property and was very impressed with the refurbishments on there. And it's one of these things where, as I said earlier on, is my concerns are, as per Paul Seckington's comments, is actually there is going to be noise outside, and it's just how do we monitor it. But also at the same time, I would still like a condition put in with regards to outside music. But it is something which locally I'm sure will be an asset to the village. But and so with various conditions put in that, I would actually support the approval.
Well, now, does anybody else want to say anything, or shall I call upon one of you to either propose the recommendation, perhaps adding these restrictive conditions, or indeed put a contrary motion? Councillor Townsend, you're leaning forward. Do you wish to say something at this point?
Well, I could be tempted.
Well, let me
I mean, I think it is a very interesting debate, and we are in a difficulty. We're not least if we unreasonably refuse this application, what happens on appeal? That obviously is a consideration. But it seems to me that listening, that you've got to balance this between this house as a private house and people lived in by someone who has a lot of parties. But if it's a commercial house, which is what it will be, and they're letting it out daily, weekly, is it not going to be a relentless flow of guests, really quite large numbers, alcohol, etc.? Is inevitably going to mean quite a lot of noise. I can see the thing of temporary, but as I think Councillor Hollowell pointed out, if we're uneasy about the use of this house now, then we should not allow it to be used as a house of entertainment, because that's what it's changed uses for. So I think from my point of view, I would say I wouldn't want it to be used as a house of entertainment. So probably I should be voting against it. And if you want to ask me to put a motion down, I should be very reluctant to do so.
If you're volunteering, that would always help us, yes.
Well, I mean, it is a difficult one. I would hope the local member was going to be here who would be able to have had word with the officers as to what the conditions. But I mean, quite obviously, it is about the effect it's going to have on the rest of the village and the noise, and therefore all the policies that we have with that. So I think we could easily get a motion, but I would be reluctant to, without knowing all the policies which we would be quoting and getting that right. I would leave that to the officers.
Well, we seem to be in the situation either we recommend we grant permission subject to the conditions, we can add conditions as we so wish, or we could put forward a motion we're going to refuse permission. Now, Councillor Elaine Wiltshire, are you going to help us here?
No, I just wondered whether or not we could limit the number of people that actually went there. Instead of having up to 100 people, whether we could have up to 50.
Susan, can we have an answer on that one? Could we do that? It'd be another condition, I suppose.
It's an option. We've assessed it on up to 100. So if we wanted to go less than that, we would just need to make that clear in condition 10, which currently states 100 people.
So we could change it to 50 then, if we so moved.
If you thought that would address your concerns, right. Yes.
Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the debate very carefully. I'm still unconvinced that with whatever conditions you put on there, that the premises would operate in a manner that could be regarded as satisfactory for the local people. And on that basis, I will put my head over the parapet and propose that we oppose this proposition.
Thank you. Do I see a seconder for this refusal? I do. Councillor Townsend, you are saying you're going to second that motion, is that correct?
I can second that one, yes.
All right. Okay, so we have a straight, simple recommendation here.
Can we have a reason for refusal?
Well, we can. Yes. Well, indeed, Councillor Wiltshire, you give us some reasons.
My reason, the conditions and the sound plan would be difficult to enforce, would cause nuisance to the surrounding area, to the surrounding residents, and would in general not be conducive to a reasonable quality of life for the people in that village.
Thank you. Paul Seckington, would those be conditions that would be deemed appropriate in your view, notwithstanding you're proposing we should recommend to approve this?
There are policies referenced at paragraphs 9.29 and 9.30 about noise and amenity that the councillor may wish to reference if that's the reasons he's giving. So we need to have some policy reasons or backing by policies. So policy paragraph 9.29 refers to policies G3, D and E of the local plan about limiting noise and impact on amenities. Policy SS2 of the emerging local plan also talks about unacceptably harming neighbouring amenities. So if the councillor is concerned about noise and disturbance, which that is the key concern, that is a relevant planning reason to give for the refusing this application, backed up by those policies that the case officer has referenced in those paragraphs.
Right, Councillor Hollowell, bring you in for a moment.
Just to throw in as well, not a policy, but NPPF 11D2. Ceased approving developments for where there are no relevant development plan policies or the policies which are most important to determine the application rate of date, granting permission unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in this framework taken as a whole. It's best I can come up with, really. Sorry.
That will add to the list, won't it? Councillor Wiltshire, Paul Wiltshire, are you content with what you're hearing there as suggested?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you to Paul Seckerton and to Stephen Hollywell for putting my words into a very acceptable form.
All right, okay. Councillor Pritchard, do you want to say something before we get to a vote?
Could I put a counter proposal in that we accept it subject to conditions?
Well, I think we should have a vote on the motion we had before us first, and let's see where we get to on that.
Thank you.
That's quite correct, Chairman. We've got a proposal which we have to vote on, so we have to take that vote.
Indeed, when we have a proposer and we have a seconder, so let's go ahead with that. Leslie Farrell, would you like to call out the what's being proposed, and then we'll go through the voting on that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So we'll start off with Councillor Bignell.
This is refusal, Barry.
So this is for refusal, yes.
Against.
Councillor Breeze.
Against.
Councillor Budden.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
Sorry, against.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Hollowell.
Abstain.
Councillor Johns.
For refusal.
Councillor Dallin.
I'm abstaining.
Councillor Samiotis.
For refusal.
Councillor Pritchard.
Against refusal.
Councillor Townsend.
For refusal.
Councillor Wiltshire, Elaine Wiltshire, sorry.
I'm going to abstain.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
I'm for refusal.
If you just give me a moment then.
Yes, I've lost count there. And I wasn't counting, it just seemed very confusing. So you'll see.
I wonder whether the. Oh.
You know that the Wiltshires have voted differently, that's all I would say.
I make that 5-5.
And 3 abstentions. So it's a chairman's casting vote.
Well, I abstained on this, so I'm going to say that I'm against refusal on the basis that the Office of Original Recommendation was in favour of it, and then we have the chance to condition it accordingly. So that is my vote.
Okay, so that motion's fell.
Yes. All right. So let us go then. I think go back to Councillor Pritchard, because you were anticipating, wondering whether if you were to do something and putting forward a vote in favour, recommendation in favour with conditions. Is that correct?
Correct.
So would you like to, do you want to just mention, without going into great detail, the conditions that you specifically want added if they're not there?
I think that was a problem with regards to conditions. Obviously, I'd like to support what the officer has said, provided that we actually can ensure that there will be no live music outside of the premises itself, with a condition.
Right. Well, can we do that? I'm getting a sort of nod from Susan, I think there. You're looking very busy. Is that right? We can.
Yes, we could amend the condition that refers to no amplified music to refer to no music at all, if that's what you would want to do.
Yeah. Yes.
Anything else?
Yes.
Hang on a moment. Just Councillor Pritchard first. Anything else?
I think that's all I've got, but I obviously will be open to any of my colleagues to suggest another condition for approval.
All right. One thing you can't think of. Right. I'll come to Councillor Wiltshire, but Councillor Townsend, I caught my eye first.
Just that I think I thought we we looked at it, agreed that are limited to 50 people rather than 100.
Yeah, that's what I think Councillor Wiltshire was. She's nodding her head now. So is that what you wanted as well?
Yes, it is, Chairman.
Excellent. Anything else whilst I'm on to you? No. All right. Any other conditions from any other councillor? Yes, Councillor Hollowell.
Just going back to the music in the garden, you said no live music. I think it ought to be no music in the garden, full stop. You know, because non-live music, recorded music, can be just as noisy. So I think no, if you're going to go down that route, it should be no music at all. And I would again remind you, the gadget for cutting out the internal music if it gets above a certain level. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes. Anyone else want to have their two pennyworth in terms of conditions here? If not, then I'll ask. Well, I think I'll.
We need a seconder, Chairman.
Now, Councillor Pritchard, you are proposing this, are you not?
I'm proposing that we will accept it with the conditions that's been outlined and also the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And a seconder for this, please. Councillor Elaine Wiltshire, thank you very much. Right, if you could just, Leslie, before we get to the vote, just to remind us what we're all voting on so as we don't say for or against in the wrong way.
Okay, so we're voting to approve this application with an additional condition that there is no music outside and it is limited to 50 people instead of 100.
Thank you. Go ahead then.
Okay, so we'll start off with Councillor Bignell.
For.
Councillor Breeze.
For.
Councillor Budden.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Hollowell.
For.
Sorry, Councillor Dallin.
For.
Councillor Johns.
For.
Councillor Pritchard.
For.
Councillor Samiotis.
For.
Councillor Townsend.
For.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
For.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
Oh gosh, I've just lost it.
I would abstain.
Thank you. Well, I think I know the result this time, but you must just declare it official.
Yes, that's been approved, just with the one abstention.
Subject to
Thank
those various conditions. So a temporary approval, as it were, there. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. That was a good debate. Let us move on, if we may, to our agenda item 9, the Appeals Progress Report. And this is where I call upon Paul Seckington, Assistant Director of Planning and Economy, to tell us what's there. Paul? We can't hear you at the moment.
I know. I hadn't started talking yet.
Oh, I see. I wonder what you were doing.
I was just prepping everything, getting everything ready for seamless transition into this presentation, but it didn't quite work. So what? Hopefully you can see my screen with big words written across it. The first appeal. So this is Appeals Progress Report. The appeal summary lists the new appeals that come in since the last time I did this report, which I think was in May. The most notable one in there is the public inquiry about the refusal at Grange Park for 300 houses. I'd put in there that we didn't have a start date, not a start date, sorry, the date of the inquiry, which has just come through for a date in October. Just been alerted by PINs as we've been in this meeting. And then it goes on to list the appeal decisions that we've had since last time, of which there are 2. The first one to report is this one at 98 Puxley Road, Deanshanger. It's a detached house just on the edge of that village, not far from the allotments, at the north end of the village on that back road to Puxley, if you know that area. This is the property in question, the one in the middle of the screen there. You see right on the edge of the settlement. It's, as you see, this is the allotments behind that hedge there. The road narrows at this point. It widens out as you enter the village. Again, this is the property in question. and what they wanted to do was a 2-storey front extension to this property. These are the plans that were submitted with the application, proposing a double gable arrangement to the front. So a small extension to the front to enlarge existing rooms rather than create additional rooms. We refused the application based on what we consider to be an incongruous design, which appear strident and unsympathetic in the street scene, and therefore be out of keeping in character with the area. The inspector obviously considered the applicant's point of view and also the decision that we reached, and dismissed the appeal because they felt that whilst within the street scene there were 2 distinct styles of dwellings, half of which were similar to this property, half of which were gable fronted. He considered the 2 styles of dwellings complemented each other, which was an attractive feature of the local street scene. Acknowledged that 2-storey additions did exist in the area, but they were in less prominent positions or at the rear, and that the smaller single-storey front extensions did not alter the character. But this large proposed double-fronted gable extension would completely change the front elevation. It would dominate the street scene, encroach into the building line, resulting in a large gable and brick wall on the sides, and effectively it wasn't very good design, poor design, adverse impact, not in keeping with the area, and dismissed the appeal. So we won it. Our decision was upheld. So that was a good decision on a simple application. The second appeal I'm talking about wasn't a planning application, but an application for prior approval. So one of these barn conversions under Class Q of the permitted development order. This is the, I think you see my arrow, the A5. I'll get a laser pointer, there you go, so you can see my pointer. That's the A5 in between Baldersbury up here and Pottersbury down here, and this is the long entrance drive to Pottersbury Lodge School. At the back of the school buildings is a farm, and the land in question is here, and the barn in question is just there. This is a slightly zoomed in version of the same plan. Now there is a large barn here, and what they want to do is convert part of the building to a dwelling under Class Q. This is what the building looks like presently.
I sense approval.
And this is what they wanted to do. So they wanted to remove quite a chunk of the building and create a separate dwelling in part of it, retaining some of the stables at one end. So if you look here, there are some stables here, and they wanted to keep some and then convert the rest into this quite modern looking dwelling. This is like a visual of that. So completely change that traditional sort of barn approach, knock half of it down, convert part, and then retain some stables at one end, and have this timber-clad sloping roof dwelling at the end of it. This wasn't, as I say, an application for planning permit. Oh, here's some photos. This is the existing barns. So that was the building that was going to be changed. This is the inside of that building, some of the stables that exist. Now, one of the requirements to benefit from this permitted development right is the buildings have to be in agricultural use for an agricultural trade or business. And what we refused the application on was that the applicant had failed to provide sufficient evidence to demonstrate that the existing building was solely in agricultural use in connection with a trade or business on the 20th of March 2013. That's what the legislation says. That's why that date's there. We also went on to say that given the proposed demolition works to the building and the new cladding, internal insulation, and new roof, the new windows and door openings, it bared little relationship to the existing building, and we considered it went far beyond what actually was a conversion. So we refused it on those two grounds. This is the extracts from the inspector's decision. He reiterated the main point was whether the building was in agricultural use or not. He saw that it was clear evidence in the past that the building was occupied as a dairy farm, but it was questioned what use the buildings had been put to since 2001 when the appellant acquired it. He noticed at the time of his visit the pens were either empty or being used for storage. He observed a modest flock of sheep on a field nearby, but no further evidence was before them to just demonstrate the land within which the building lies was in use as a part of a business rather than just a hobby farm or paddock for horses. And that was it. That's how short it was a shorter decision on this than it was on the two-story front extension. It basically concluded that it wasn't demonstrated that it was an agricultural trade or business, considered it to be more of a hobby farm, and therefore didn't benefit from the permitted development right, and therefore dismissed the appeal. He didn't go on to talk about the other issues that we raised, which is disappointing, but we won on the main point. So that's another appeal that was dismissed, and every appeal decision we've had so far this year, which I think is about between 8 and 10, all have been dismissed so far.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Now we need to, we are recommended to accept the position statement. So can I have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Lane Wiltshire, all right, and a seconder, Councillor Townsend. All those in favour, say aye.
Can we have vision?
Can we have vision as well? Yes, thank you, Paul. We've seen, can you get rid of that picture? Yeah, back to where we are. Yeah, so everybody in favour, I think, of that? Yeah.
Yes, agreed.
Well, thank you very much. Well, on that basis, that brings to an end our meetings this afternoon because there's no other urgent business, you'll be glad to hear. But the bad news is that we're going to be meeting virtually again, rather than in person next month. But for those of you watching, Thursday, August the 6th is the next date we are due to assemble. So until then, that is it. And thank you for all for attending this afternoon. The meeting is now closed at 4:07.